first started medical school, I was a little bit of a disaster. I was constantly behind in my work, the workload was way more intense than I'd ever imagined, and my grades were just terrible. I'd stay out partying with friends until 5 AM, barely sleep, skip lectures, and this ended up with me failing an exam in first year. This was a little bit of a wake-up call for me, and so I decided to start taking university seriously. I began using a few strategies that totally changed my learning experience, and thanks to these techniques, I went from bottom of the class to coming first in medicine and surgery, while also having time to socialize and build a 7-figure business on the side. So in this video, I'll share the 7 counterintuitive learning strategies I wish I'd used from day one. These strategies aren't obvious, and they were pretty much the opposite of what I thought you needed to do to study at university. So hit that subscribe button and let's dive into strategy number 1. Before I even got to medical school, the university sent out a huge reading list, and like most students, I ended up spending a load of cash on large textbooks I'd never even heard of. When it comes to learning, we're taught that you should read a book through from the first chapter to the last, and then put it on our bookshelf as we finished that book. In my first year, I realized pretty quickly that reading academic textbooks on topics like human biology was not really my thing. Some parts were interesting, but I found I just got overwhelmed by the sheer volume of content, and passively reading wasn't really helping me to learn the topics tested at exam time. There was one simple change that I made to my life that I've done ever since then for the last 10 years, which has been completely transformational and which has saved me a ton of time when learning anything. And that change was essentially to treat books as reference materials rather than reading them cover to cover before moving on to the next book. So before I started doing this, I'd focus on a single book and I'd read it cover to cover before moving on to the next book. I just kind of assumed that that's what everybody did. But then after reading a bunch of blogs and books about productivity, what I realized was that most productive people who read lots and lots of books each year typically jump between books and never really finish any single book. They find the sections that are relevant, actively learn the information in them, and then put that book down. This way, if I'm learning anything, I usually have 2 or 3 books on a topic or subject that I'm learning, and then I dive into specific chapters that help me to deeply understand that topic. I might bookmark pages or sections on my Kindle or in a physical book and save any key messaging to my Notion book notes template. Most books have a lot of filler content around key concepts that just isn't worth your time reading. And this subtle change has saved me a crazy amount of time over the last 10 years when it comes to learning pretty much anything. Counterintuitive study tip number 2 I actually discovered in my second year of medical school. Once I'd made a decision in first year to take things a little bit more seriously, I had this grand vision of myself in the library surrounded by stacks of books, tirelessly absorbing knowledge and becoming a master of my subject. But as I quickly discovered, this romantic notion of studying was far from the reality of my actual studying experience. I used to approach studying the same way most people do, by cramming endless hours of reading and note-taking into my schedule, trying to memorize every detail and concept in the textbooks. The problem was that no matter how much time I spent in the library, I'd forget most of the material I'd learned by the time exams rolled around. And that was just incredibly frustrating. Then I stumbled upon a book called Make It Stick, and this introduced me to a whole new concept for studying. The authors described how, instead of trying to memorize every detail in a linear fashion, they would focus on understanding the core concepts and creating a system to easily recall that information. This was an absolute game changer for me. And from that moment on, I ditched my old method of studying and started building study systems that prioritized understanding the key concepts and efficiently retaining that information. Tip number 3 is all about your study environment. When I was at med school, I had a really awesome room with my gaming computer, I had a cozy reading nook, set up with a soft armchair, a lamp, and a small table for my textbooks and notes. I was ready to tackle every assignment and exam in my bed or at my desk to reduce any time getting to the busy library, and I had my housemates and kitchen close by for any break time. In the beginning, this was absolutely fine. I would spend hours in my room poring over my textbooks, highlighting passages, and taking my notes. But over time, I began to notice a shift in my focus and my productivity levels. My room, which was supposed to be my study sanctuary, was becoming a place of distraction and procrastination. One day, I stumbled upon an article discussing the importance of separating your study space from your living space. It struck a chord with me, and I realized that my room was no longer the ideal place for me to study. It had become a place of rest, relaxation, and entertainment, making it difficult for me to concentrate on learning anything. And that's when I decided to make a change. I began searching for different study environments, from libraries and coffee shops to outdoor parks and and quiet campus nooks. I discovered that by separating my study space from my living space, I was able to focus more intently on my work and retain the information I was learning for much longer. Something else interesting happened too. By switching up my environment, I actually found I was enjoying studying more. The different locations were like mini adventures. I'd plan where I was going to study from and have some backup ideas if that place was going to be busy. Whenever I needed to study, I chose a designated spot outside of my room, and I rotated between different locations to keep my mind fresh and engaged. Not only did this improve my focus and productivity, but it also made my room a more enjoyable space for relaxing and leisure, and my sleep improved too. If you're struggling with focus and productivity while studying in your room, try finding new alternative environments to study from. You might be surprised at how much of a difference it makes in your learning process. Now I can pop on my noise-cancelling headphones, open my laptop, and work from pretty much any location you can think of, whether it's sat on a beach working on my businesses to traveling on a noisy plane. Study tip number 4 is going to seem pretty counterintuitive and borderline antisocial, so do stick with it. I'm a big fan of studying with others, as it's fun and you can learn new things from different people's perspectives. When I was revising for practical or oral examinations in medicine, working in groups or pairs was pretty much essential. We gathered at the library, found a quiet corner, and opened our textbooks ready to tackle our upcoming exams together. But more often than not, in these group study sessions, as the hours passed, I began to realize that I wasn't as prepared for group learning as I thought. You see, back then, I was still figuring out how to study effectively myself. I had no solid routine or strategy in place. I spent most of my time trying to keep up with the group and understand their methods rather than focusing on my own learning. I left those study sessions feeling pretty overwhelmed and a little bit discouraged. We'd often end up getting distracted and on reflection probably weren't being as efficient or focused as we could have been with our time. Over time, I started to reflect on my own study habits and realized that I needed to master my own approach to learning before I could effectively study with others. Getting the most out of group studying is a whole study technique in itself. I realized that I needed to be a little bit more selfish and focus on the key topics that I would get the most benefit from. For example, when practicing medical examination, there was no point me studying with people who were behind me and who hadn't grasped some of the basics. It was much better for me to study with people who were top 1% students and to prepare for those sessions as I'd get the most out of them. So I approached the next group sessions with a newfound sense of confidence and self-awareness. I was better equipped to contribute to the group discussions, ask relevant questions, and share my insights, all because I'd first mastered how to study on my own. Now, whenever I join any kind of learning group, I make sure I have a strong foundation in the subject matter and a clear understanding of my own personal study methods. This allows me to engage more effectively with my peers and benefit from our collective knowledge and experience. So if you're considering joining or forming a study group, first take the time to develop your own study skills and habits, master how to study independently so that you can truly maximize the benefits of studying with others. Trust me, it's a game changer that will elevate your academic performance and make your group study sessions much more rewarding. Counterintuitive study tip number 5 is a bit of a meta-learning strategy and isn't obvious at all, and that's to keep a work progress journal. Now, when I first heard about journaling, I was pretty skeptical. Who has the time to jot down their daily progress when they're already swamped with exams, assignments, and extracurricular activities? But trust me, this little habit can make a huge difference over time. When I started recording my daily study progress, something amazing happened. I began to gain a deep understanding of my own learning process, my strengths and weaknesses, and the areas where I needed to improve. Before this, I'd just study right up until bedtime and then go again the next day without really thinking, am I learning anything, or are my current study methods helping me to deeply understand the topics that are going to come up on the exam? Journaling helps give perspective to what you're learning and kind of forces you to zoom out, take a breath, and look at that bigger picture. Each day, I would take a few minutes to reflect on my study sessions and write down what I'd accomplished, what challenges I'd faced, and what I'd learned. This simple practice helped me identify patterns in my productivity levels, recognize when I needed to adjust my study strategies, and celebrate small victories along the way. Over time, keeping a work progress journal transformed my approach to studying and working in general. I became much more organized, focused, and intentional with my time. I was able to set realistic goals for myself and track my progress towards achieving them. But most importantly, it helped me develop a growth mindset and a sense of accountability for my own learning. So if you're looking for a game-changing study habit that will boost your productivity and self-awareness, give the work progress journal a try. It might seem counterintuitive at first, but trust me, the insights you'll gain are well worth the effort in the end. To help you out, I've popped a link to a Notion template that I use for journaling in the comments below to help you get started, but you can also use a physical journal or your favorite iPad note-taking app of your choice too. Okay, study tip number 6 was probably the most counterintuitive for me, and the one that took me the longest to get my head around, but which gave me the biggest returns. And that tip is to go straight to past papers rather than building knowledge first and then testing yourself. When I first tried this approach, it made absolutely zero sense. It felt like jumping into the deep end without learning how to swim. But trust me, this strategy is insanely good for boosting your learning performance if you're studying for exams. In my early med school days, I spent hours studying textbooks and taking nice looking notes, only to find that I was unprepared for the actual exams. The questions were different from what I'd studied, and I struggled to apply my knowledge. That's when I decided to dive right into past paper questions. If you prepare using the same question format and difficulty level of questions as appear at the real exam, you'll ensure there are no surprises when that exam comes around. Instead of focusing solely on the textbook material, I began practicing with real exam questions. This helped me understand what to expect, identified my knowledge gaps, and helped me to learn how to apply my understanding to specific scenarios. By tackling past papers early on, I became more confident, targeted my studies more effectively, and improved my overall exam performance. And this can be applied for anything you're learning beyond exams too. Learning to code, dive straight into a coding project and learn as you go. Learning to play guitar, figure out what a chord is by analysing your favourite song. So if you're looking for a smart, efficient study strategy, give past exam papers a try. It might seem daunting at first, but the results can be completely transformational. Study tip number 7 is more advice than a specific study strategy, and that is that there's nothing good that ever happens after 1 AM. Like most medics, I love staying out late and partying, and I also believe that late night cramming would somehow boost my academic performance. But sacrificing sleep for studying not only isn't effective, it can also actively harm our brain's ability to learn. With lots of late nights, I found that my grades were suffering and my mental and physical well-being were taking a hit too. That's when I decided to rethink my late night study habits. I started setting a strict bedtime, ensuring that I got at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep each night. I began to focus on quality study sessions during the day rather than dragging them out into the early morning hours. I also focused on setting a hard bedtime if I was hanging out with friends. If it got to midnight and I needed to work the next day, I made a conscious decision not to stay out late as it would impact that following day. From this small habit change, the results were pretty crazy. I discovered that being well rested meant my brain was far more effective at retaining information and staying focused during study sessions. My academic performance improved, and I found myself feeling more energized and motivated throughout the day. If you're in the habit of staying up late to study, consider giving yourself a bedtime and prioritizing your sleep. It might seem counterproductive at first, but the benefits of a well-rested mind far outweigh the extra hours spent studying late at night. If we look at the science, sleep is when our brains consolidate memories, and we need exercise and rest in order to solve problems and apply what we've learned effectively. Now, if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to learn more about how to manage your time, then check out this video over here, which is an in-depth guide of the things that I do that I would do specifically to manage my time and be more productive and efficient when learning anything. So do check it out. Thanks so much for watching and for subscribing, and I'll catch you again in the next video. See ya.